I Won't Envy is a podcast about professional jealousy in creative fields. In my own career, I've had to confront the fact that jealousy is a byproduct of being an artist, and that no amount of repressing or denying it can make it go away. In fact, my most successful strategy to manage my professional jealousy has been to name it. But what are other strategies? In each episode, I'll be talking to artists in different creative fields to learn about their relationships to professional jealousy and how they've come to understand it and navigate it. I'm Vivek Shraya, and you're listening to I Won't Envy. Today I'm talking to Alicia Elliott. Alicia Elliott is a Mohawk writer and editor currently living in Brantford, Ontario with her family. Her best-selling first book, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, was nominated for the Hilary Weston Writers' Trust Prize for Nonfiction and won the Forest of Reading Evergreen Award. Her debut novel, And Then She Fell, was an instant bestseller and was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I wanted to talk to Alicia because I've always admired her fearless commitment to tackling difficult subjects.
It feels like in some ways, being in the arts and stuff like that, or just being in the society maybe, is conducive to creating these notions of jealousy.
Yes.
Because I've thought about this a lot, and I've talked to other like new writers about it, because I feel like, when you're first starting out in any sort of arts venture, you have these like you have this goal. You're like, I'm gonna write a book, and then you write the book, and then all of a sudden you've achieved that goal, and so you got to change the goalpost. You got to move it, and now I want to get this book published, or I want to get an agent, or all of these things, right? And as soon as you get that, I feel like we don't even give ourselves a chance to celebrate that or think about how hard we work to get those things. Immediately it's on to the next, on to the next. What can I
100%.
get next? Like we're almost like seeing all of these accomplishments as like, that's not to like be too dramatic about it, but almost like land to conquer, right? To like stick our like flags in and be like, I did this, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Which is a very, I feel like a very Western way of looking at things,
Totally.
for sure. But there's also like the way that the world operates. It's like we always have to be hustling, and we always have to be grinding, and there's never going to be, okay, I did this and now I don't have to work anymore. I don't have to do things. So you're always trying to figure out what is the next way I'm going to basically earn a living. And with that is like, okay, if I get this award, for example, maybe I won't have to work as hard for the next little bit. And so,
Totally.
and then all of a sudden it's like that person was up for the award, and and then you start to get into, even when you like people who have won awards or gotten any sort of professional accomplishments, and there's that little tiny voice in your head that's like, well, it should have been me. Why? Just because.
Okay, yes. And like in those moments, like how do you manage that feeling where you're like, you go on Twitter and you're like, so and so got the award nomination that you didn't, or whatever. I mean, for me, like my jealousy is so like it's not even sensical, because like some years it's like I haven't even put out a book. Like, why did I expect I'd be nominated? It's like, it's not like, it's like no one's gone through the back catalog suddenly for Giller or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in that moment though, like how, or maybe not in that moment, like how have you navigated those feelings? And like, do you even name it to yourself?
Sometimes maybe I hesitate to name it to myself, because from the beginning of my career until now, I think I've tried to really be like, okay, you know, I've tried to think of it very logically. I try to logic this out, and think through, okay, so let's say Giller nominations or whatever, right? Just as an example, there's a certain, I tell myself, okay, there are like what, 5 people on this jury, all of which whom have probably very diverse tastes. And I've been on like grant juries or like juries for like
Totally.
awards for certain things. And there's sometimes where not everyone is going to agree on what is the best or even what they like the most. Some people's favorite is going to be something another person hates. And when you're in those situations, then it's kind of like, what can we all agree on at least?
Totally.
You know, and so I try to remember that, like relating it back to my own experiences where, maybe an award was given to someone where I'm like, I wouldn't have given that award personally to that person because I like this other thing better. It's not even like, and that's where what I try to remember too is it's not like that work that is awarded isn't good. It's just personally, I liked something else better. And so much of it comes down to these personal preferences that often people don't really think too hard about, when they're doing it. They're like, I just like this better. And then it's only when we start to get into these discussions with perhaps other jurors where then all of a sudden we have to rationalize our taste and, argue that, oh, this deserves it because of
Yes.
this, or, you know what I mean? And then we get into these kind of weird discussions. But so I try to, at this point, very much keep that in mind. However, even with that, there's always going to be something where something happens and I'm like, oh man, like,
Mm.
that would have been great, but,
Well, especially if
and
there's a cash prize.
yes, absolutely. And I think that's the thing too, at the end of the day, right? You're like, oh man, I really could have used some of that cash. That would have been amazing. That would have been life changing. But so even now, like when I feel those things, I try to let myself kind of just acknowledge it. But I do have to, I feel like sometimes I hesitate, like I said, to name it as jealousy and be like, I'm just in my feelings. And, you know, and then afterwards, usually I'll try to talk with someone who I trust. Usually that's my husband to be like, hey, I'm feeling a certain way
Mm.
about this. It doesn't mean that I'm not happy for the people that
Yes.
were nominated or that there wasn't amazing work because often there is. It's not even a question of that. It's just this feeling of inadequacy, your own kind of self-doubt about what you're
Mm.
producing or the level of your art or whatever, wanting that validation, right? And I think it's hard to, I don't know, hard to kind of
Hmm.
ever feel fully validated that your work is, you know, I think
Good.
in some
Yeah.
sense like good or important. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
it's
even just
interesting, like
good.
this point about being on a jury, because I think the few times I've been on a jury, it's been eye opening because you're right. Like we absolutely, so often the thing that gets chosen, the book, the application, it's the one we all can agree on. There's also all kinds of,
Hmm.
you know, to be totally transparent, like political issues that can inform those decisions. Last year, we gave it to this kind of
Absolutely.
individual. So this year, we need to be thinking about this particular box to fill. You know, like those are
Mm.
there's like all kinds of things that we never know in the background, and so I can definitely relate to that method. Both of your methods, the sort of like breaking down the behind the scenes jury, and then also having that sort of tender moment with your partner. I definitely have that as well, where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little sore about this. Do you find that your professional jealousy is accelerated or lessened depending on whether or not you actually know the individual, and how you find that it's easier for you to manage your jealousy if they are, yeah, they're more known to you as opposed to a stranger, or do you find it's the opposite?
Um, okay. I think when I so okay, let's maybe I'll talk vaguely because
Sure.
I just had like my novel came out in this kind of cycle of award season, right? And there are all these awards that happen. My book was not nominated for pretty much
I'm
any of them.
sorry.
And so that's fine.
Been
It's like
there,
I said,
been
like
there.
it's whatever. But the thing is that I think when I've read work that I'm like, that's a very good book.
Hmm.
Um and then also like kind of going along with that, I met this person is lovely, then that I think makes it easier for me.
Yes.
When it's hard is when I've read something and I'm like, this is trash. Really? So like this is getting all the attention. That's when it like gets under my skin.
That makes sense.
And so I guess sometimes also maybe when someone is not gracious about some or like or seems like they aren't, I guess maybe appreciating what they have and it like feels, like then I get a little bit like Are you
Yeah, yeah,
kidding?
yeah, 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 yeah.
I would love to have that. And they're just like, no, it's fine, whatever. Or like, I don't,
Oh,
does that make
100%. The
sense?
people that annoy me the most are the people that are like, I don't care about awards. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't care who you are. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that. Like, it doesn't mean that like everybody like feels super validated or happy about it, but I think on some level,
Yeah,
recognition's recognition. I also think some people have the privilege of not
absolutely.
caring, right? Like, depending on how
Yeah.
acknowledged you are elsewhere, how much money you're making elsewhere, whatever it is that like awards or whatever gives an individual, if you have opportunities all the time, if you don't even need to be on social media, then yeah, maybe like another award doesn't mean anything to you. But for a lot of us,
Yeah.
like awards can mean the difference in advance size. It can mean the difference between a one book
Hmm.
deal versus two book deal, right? Like these things, they do. There's the internal validation for the small me's and you's, but there's also the real
Yes.
capitalist sort of like result of being like a prize nominee or award nominee, right? But I think one of the things that
Hmm.
like is occurring to me as we're talking about this is that I too find that if I've engaged with the work and if I know the individual and the work is good according to me, and and I know the individual, it's harder for me to project onto them, and therefore it's
Mm,
it's harder to feel jealous, and I can tap into a genuine feeling of happiness for that individual. And so I don't know. This isn't a
yeah.
question for you, but I'm having a moment where I'm like, oh, I wonder if one of the ways to work through to sorry, professional jealousy is
I mean, it's a form of
is
development as well, I suppose, working through
is
that.
to develop stronger community, right? Like I think part of the problem is we're
Mm,
so siloed. I think about the last time I had a conversation with you. Like obviously I see you online. I'm like so happy for your success and so happy whenever you announce something, but like we don't get to have a lot of conversation with each other. And books are a complicated medium because they take a long time to read. And so I
yes.
don't know. I'm just sort of like, oh, I wonder if we made more of an active effort to engage in relationship building and or engaging in the work of others in our field, would it help
Mhm.
prevent feelings of jealousy? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, I don't know that it would necessarily prevent feelings of jealousy. I think just speaking for
Sure.
me
Yeah.
personally, even when I do love the book, even when I think the person is lovely, there's always still, I think for me anyways, a little thing that's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
man, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that inner
Totally.
devastation. But it's easier for me to get
Yeah, yeah,
over
yeah, yeah. That's
when
exactly it. That's
that's the
exactly it. Yeah,
case,
no, yeah. I
right?
think prevent is the wrong word. I don't think the issue is about preventing it, and that's sort of the point of this conversation is like
Yeah.
understanding that it is something that we feel, but it's more like abate. Is that the right word? Like to lessen or to get
Yeah.
over it. Um, have you ever experienced what you think is jealousy by another artist, or or suspected that another artist was jealous of you?
Um,
I know it's one
hmm.
of those hard questions because you don't want to be that person that's like, that person's jealous of me. But I'm curious, like, if you feel like that's happened to you, or maybe someone's even said to you, I'm jealous of you.
Most of the people that I've encountered are pretty normal, I would say, about it. And like honest about, like, oh, I felt kind of jealous. Like I feel like that's honest. I appreciate that kind of authenticity instead of carrying it.
Yeah, you like the honesty?
Yeah, it
You like when people tell you
yeah,
directly?
I would rather that than like because I don't know, something about in my head, I'm like, we're wasting time. If you're just like tiptoeing around it and then carrying this resentment, I would rather you just talk to me about it and then we kind of like go through it. And then we can move on, right? Theoretically.
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting because I definitely have had people say that to me, and I'm always like, let's all self-regulate. Like I like the idea of naming it to ourselves, to naming it to our friends, to naming it to our
Yes.
partner. But like I think that there's some things you don't need to say to the individual because then it's just awkward. Like, what do you say then? You're like, thanks, sorry,
Yes, yes.
like,
I think there
oh,
is a difference between someone who's just like I think it depends on the person who's saying it to you too,
sure,
right?
yeah,
So if they're
sure,
like
sure,
someone you
sure,
barely talk to and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so jealous of you." And you're like,
yeah.
"Okay, I don't know where to go with this conversation." That is bizarre. And like, by all means, what am I supposed to say? Thanks? Yeah, like I don't know. But if someone is just like says things that I think because I think most people that I know who've said things kind of imply things like, oh, it seems like, your career kind of blew up out of nowhere and stuff like that.
Mm,
And,
mm.
not understanding, of course, that like I was working full time at Starbucks when my career started. And like, so literally, I was raising a kid. I was full time working in like basically like a minimum wage, a little higher than minimum wage, but like a really generally everyone considers those shitty customer service jobs. And then coming home and trying to write in between and stuff like that. And people don't acknowledge that part of it. They think, oh, this just came out of nowhere. And I'm like, dude, I was like, give it like in some sense it feels like that's negating like I did not get accepted into any master's programs. A lot of the people who say these things did, and so they had these opportunities. I had to figure out other ways to do that, which meant I wasn't doing these things in school. I was actively trying to publish things in places to build up my CV so that I could apply for grants. Like so they were doing stuff in school, I was doing this. And I think when people say certain things like, oh, it seems like your career just kind of came out of nowhere, there's like this, I think this underlying sense of like, how did you do it? Like, so I
Yeah,
could
yeah,
do it
yeah.
too. Or like, what advice can you give me? And I'm like, I don't have any advice. Like,
But see,
it was
that's a
very
better
unhealthy.
question. But that's a better question, right? Like, do you have some advice? Like, again, I think this is where
Mm,
self-regulating, like, you can feel jealous, but if you actually are able to break it down the way you did just now and to be able to, like, offer that generosity to someone else to be like, I don't know their backstory. I don't know what Alicia's been through to get to this position where Alicia got this amazing book deal or whatever it is. But I would love to
yeah.
know how Alicia did it. Why don't I ask Alicia that question? Like, that to me feels like so much more productive. Like a productive way to work through your jealousy is to like give someone the benefit of
Yeah.
the doubt, understand that you don't have the full story of their success no matter what you think you
Hmm.
know, and then turn it into an opportunity to have dialogue or conversation or ask for advice. Like, I don't know, to me that feels, yeah, that feels like a nice trajectory, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that maybe people, depending on like where they're at in their life or their career or whatever, maybe are ashamed to ask. But I don't know. I think that those are the kinds of questions, like anything that leads to actual
Yeah, yeah,
discussion
yeah.
and like understanding, as opposed to a lot of, because like you kind of referenced earlier, a lot of like jealousy is like you're projecting things onto someone that they don't necessarily know anything about or understand, or like it might have nothing to do with them. You know what I mean? And so I think when you're projecting stuff, it's harder to do that when you actually talk to someone and they break down what actually happened behind the
Totally.
scenes that they didn't see, when all they saw was like an announcement online or something,
Totally.
right?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I find announcement time for me like really interesting just in terms of the kinds of
Mm.
comments. Like there are the comments that are like, congratulations, amazing, but there's always the comments that are like, another book, I can't keep up with what you're doing, or like, when when
Oh,
when do you sleep? And again, like I'm not saying that those are necessarily coming from a like jealousy. I think that
yeah,
social media creates an environment where we do compare ourselves to each other.
of
But
course.
again, I'm like, if someone was announcing a book or whatever good news, it would, or like if someone had a new baby, I wouldn't be like another one.
I mean, maybe we would think it if they already had
Exactly.
like five
Maybe.
children, but
Well,
but we wouldn't
no,
say it.
exactly. Self regulate. Okay. So I'm curious. We've talked about this a little bit. If you have learned anything from jealousy, or what can jealousy teach us?
Um, I think for, I don't know, maybe this is like a very therapy type
No,
answer or something
please.
like that. But I think whenever you have really strong reactions to something that feel kind of outsized to what is actually happening, I think it's good a good practice to kind of be like, where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is this coming from down inside me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what insecurity is this touching? Because it feels in some sense like jealousy is, everyone talks about it as though it's this like terrible thing. How could you let yourself, do this? This is so vindictive and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I feel like if you really come down to it, it's like there's this bruise covering your entire body, and anything that happens, it could like touch it and then it's, activated and hurts and
Mm-hmm.
you're in pain. And I think one of the things that I try to remind myself is, apart from like how I feel about my own work and the ways that, even like jealousy about stuff now is affecting what I'm thinking about, like what I'm gonna write
Yeah.
next, or like, is this gonna fit in, or is this gonna alienate readers? And like, is this part of my brand, whatever a brand is? Apart from that, there is like I think about, or I try to think about, what's my favorite book? What's my favorite
Mm.
movie? What's my favorite album? And what kind of, I guess, outward like awareness, appreciation, what awards did this get? What sales did this do? And all of those things, like when you're thinking about going back to that space where it's just you and your relationship with a piece of
Mm-hmm.
art, those things don't matter, like some books that I really love never got any sort of attention, like especially not awards or like great sales. Sometimes like if the person has passed away, it didn't blow up until after they died. And so, thinking about how art has a very particular um, relationship with each individual. And we as artists can't dictate what sort of relationship someone is going to have with our art. And so, at the end of the day, all we can control is what we made. And
Totally.
so I try to come back to that,
Totally.
is like, did I write the book I wanted to write? Often the answer is yes.
Mm. Totally. I mean, I think one of the things that I feel like you're sort of like making me cognizant of is the fact that ultimately jealousy is actually never about the other person. It's like when you talk about going inside and talking to that insecure little self or that bruised part of you, that actually that bruise or that insecurity or that doubt, like all of those things actually has nothing to do with the other person, has nothing to do with their art or their award or whatever it is that you're jealous of. It's like whatever this part is that you need to work through, and whatever, wherever it came from. And so I think like conversely, it actually really makes sense then that the work is then to actually go back to yourself and be able to be like, am I making the art that I want to make in the world? Am I being the kind of artist that I want to be in the world? Like, I think that those are all the questions that like matter the most. I mean, similar to what you're saying, I think one of the things I try to remember is that like, I mean, this is a bit morbid, but like, when I die, like, and if people, including close people, like family or friends, they talk about my art, if my art is something that comes up, like, who cares what prize it was nominated for? Who cares how many weeks it was a national bestseller? Like, I hope that what people say is actually that like I made art that was like challenging or meaningful or made them see the world in a different way. And you can't actually measure those things, and those aren't actually things that you can be jealous of in another person, and so I think that's another thing that like helps me recalibrate in those moments of like what actually matters here. Is there anything else you wanted to say that we didn't get to cover, or anything that we didn't hit?
um I'm jealous of your fashion sense. Every time I see a picture, I'm like, damn, damn.
I'll take it.
Those accessories with that outfit, everything is working.
Thank you.
I'm like,
Thank you.
yes.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take that. I Won't Envy is produced in partnership with Buddies in Bad Times Theater, the world's largest and longest running queer theater. For 46 years, Buddies has carved out a sexy, disobedient edge in Toronto's theater scene and has been a world leader in developing queer voices and stories for the stage. You can learn more about their programming, from theater and festivals to parties and drag shows, at their website, buddiesandbadtimes.com, or find them on social media at BuddiesTO. I Won't Envy is a podcast by me, Vivek Shraya. It is recorded, edited, and engineered by Beau Cassidy, with original music by myself, produced by James Bunton. Thank you so much for listening.